Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar. This is the last in our current series of social media marketing, and you're very welcome. I hope you've enjoyed this series so far and got plenty from it, and you're looking forward to being much more effective social media marketers than you might be at the moment. This webinar is about evaluation. And this is really about the final stage of the cycle we've been talking about throughout the series, which is the cycle of planning, followed by implementation, followed by evaluation, which then leads on to a repeat of the cycle where we amend the plan, implement what we've amended, and evaluate again, and then we amend the plan and implement it and evaluate it. And so we go on. And so this is the final stage, to some people, the most important stage, actually. So moving on, then just a quick overview of what we're going to be doing. This will be all you need to know really about evaluating the effectiveness of your social media. We'll follow it with a Q&A session. So please do input your questions as you go along. There's a little button at the bottom, which is called Q&A. Just click on that and you can then type in your question and we'll come to it at the end, I hope, unless we get hundreds of them. We also have a giveaway that we're giving away at the end of the webinar. This is actually the week of our 30th anniversary as a company. Marcom was founded by myself in 1990 on the 20th of June. Hard to believe, I'm still here. So we have a giveaway to celebrate. The objective of today's webinar is to learn how to evaluate the effectiveness of your social media and to determine how to use your findings to inform your next activities. That's what we hope to achieve today, so that you have a full understanding of how to evaluate and how to use it moving forwards. And the outcome would be that you then can adopt what we've called an integrated and holistic approach to evaluating and developing your social media strategy. And really, you have a cycle of continuous improvement, which is what we referred to at the beginning of the webinar, about the planning, the implementation, and the evaluation being repeated: plan, implement, evaluate, plan, implement, evaluate. And this is what we'd call continuous improvement. So the question, really, the overall question that we're going to be answering is why evaluate? You need to take a good hard look in the mirror, and you need to consider what benefit you're going to get from evaluating what you've been up to in the previous cycle. The reality is, if you don't undertake evaluation of some sort, you will have no way of knowing if you're achieving anything. You cannot seriously continue for long without taking that hard look in the mirror and seeing what you're up to and what's effective and what isn't, what's working, what isn't, how many people are following you, how many people are engaging with you, how many people like what you're doing. If you're not asking yourself these questions, then really you're just shooting in the dark, frankly. You need to be objective to do this, not subjective, because if you are too subjective, it means that the planning that you then do following it will be based on false reality. The figures are objective, and you need to be able to read the figures, access the figures, read them and understand them in order to realize what you need to be doing differently the next time around. If you're led by the emotion or the excitement of engagement, that can actually take you down a blind alley. There's a number of occasions, I'm sure we've all done it, where you get into a discussion with somebody on social media, maybe on LinkedIn or wherever, and it's very exciting, very interesting, and you think, at the end of it, well, that was good. Everybody's really involved in this and it's working. Actually, that's not true necessarily. One person is, but what about all the rest of them? So tied to that, you need to avoid the risk of self-referencing. Be led by the figures. Just because you like it doesn't mean say everybody else will like it. Just because you're interested or one person is interested doesn't mean that everyone else will be interested. And linked with that is, I've put here, don't cook the figures. The reality is that it's very easy to slip it, to make the mistake of interpreting the figures the way you want to interpret them. Because you think something's going to happen, you see it in the figures. It's not always the case that your perception is the reality that is happening out there. You need to approach it with an open mind and be prepared to face the bad news, because there will be less good news, always, of course. So I'm now going to pass over to my colleague and we're going to consider evaluation. And this, I think, Ben, you're going to talk about this, aren't you?
Yeah, just to cover quickly what we're going to talk about today, and looping back really to our original introductory webinar on this. So measuring your progress is vital, and why. So for the beginning, we're going to cover what we are monitoring and how we're listening to that, how we're collecting our data, choosing the tools that we want to use, or creating the tools for ourselves to monitor our engagement and our technical statistics that are coming back, that are being fed back to us from our channels, and as well as thinking about how we respond to our audience and our clients, and as well as mapping future changes that we might anticipate. So we need to talk about also processing the data. How do we actually, once we've got the statistic to hand, what do we use and how do we process that data? How do we refine it such that it can be presented in a legible way, either to our teams, our colleagues, or for our own strategic review? Then we'll look at analysing it. So now we have the feedback, we have the readouts, we have the analysis and the evaluation to refer to. We need to be able to draw out some of our comparisons. Not easy to do with limited knowledge set, but all the same a really important step in terms of bringing it back round to the strategy. And we also need to be thinking at that point about setting new targets for ourselves for the next phase of the cycle. And then response and planning once more. As I said, we're talking about new targets, new campaign planning. We'll, at this point, at the end of this phase of strategy, we're evaluating, but we're also thinking about the next step and how we want to test, how we want to change, how we want to respond to our previous efforts. So without further ado, over to Gil about measuring and monitoring.
Thank you, Ben. So measuring and monitoring is all about collecting the data that you need, the statistics and information that you need to help you with evaluating how effective was your social media campaign. So the measuring and monitoring of your data should start just as you launch the campaign and even before, because you would like to know if there have been any changes throughout the campaign, whether you had many visitors or many comments or high engagement rate throughout the campaign. So this is the steps you need to take to collect this data throughout publishing and monitoring the campaign. So the first thing that we just wanted to say is many of our customers find it really hard to, in general, kind of going through the evaluation process, just because it's a lot of time, takes a lot of time, and there's a lot of information and a lot of processing that needs to be done. And actually it doesn't really have to be like that, especially in social media. There are very simple metrics and only a certain amount of data that you actually have to really understand and analyze the project. So here's just some examples of information that will be very beneficial for you to collect through your social media campaigns, such as engagement rate, impressions, what was the reach, organic or sponsored reach of your post, meaning how many people saw it. And you just need to choose exactly what's right for your campaign.
I think just to add to that, Gil, before you go on, I think there's a big risk. You start looking at the analytics and you get kind of snow blindness. And actually, there's probably only a few figures you need out of that. And you just need to sit down and work out which figures it is that you need. And then, frankly, ignore the rest because they're just a distraction. But they kind of chuck everything at you. And so you have to be able to work your way through that, pull out the ones that you want, ignore the rest, and then carry on.
Absolutely. And this is exactly what social media channels do. They build their own very sophisticated native analytics. So on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, you'll be able to go to find out how your posts been performing, and there's all these data and analytics and engagement rate, etc. And all these could be confusing at times, but that is a really good source for analytics. So you'll always be able to go to the native channels to find that data.
It'd also be nice if they sort of adhered to an international standard of what the statistics mean and how they are derived, but of course they don't, and it's slightly different for every channel. So you have to be able to standardize for yourself how you determine them and how you read them going forward. Absolutely.
And here's another big reason why you should really kind of pick your most relevant data is you can get a lot of different formats for your data as well across different channels, and understanding our overall arching answer to all of these might be difficult. So that's why the most basic you could go, the better. You can make your own tools like using Excel or any other software that you'd like to create graphs, or even just to collect the statistics. So every day or every post that you send, how many likes did you have? What was your impressions? How many shares this post have? And just collect this data as you go throughout your campaign. It's probably worth doing it a couple of days later, or maybe a week after the post has been out. So you have some sort of a measuring the time scale of the effectiveness of this post. And you need to stick to that specific time. If you're checking one post an hour after posting it, you might get more likes, and that will comparing to a post that you check a week later, and they might obscure the data. So you need to be quite persistent. The other more effective tool that solves a lot of problems are social media analytics tools, such as Sprout Social, Hootsuite Analytics. There's many, actually, if you Google social media analytics tools, there's many tools around them, around the web, and people love these tools because they help with creating dashboards and custom reports, and they are able to connect to all these different channels that you have and perform some comparison between the social media networks.
I think they're especially useful, aren't they, for large companies like ours, agencies who want to be able to report thoroughly on these things. Also, it sort of aggregates the data very quickly and creates a visual solution for you. We've created some of our own tools in-house. Excel comes packaged with a lot of the things that you need to, from creating a simple data table and generating a chart from that you can easily visualize things. But some of these more sophisticated dashboards are really useful if you are planning across lots of different channels and lots of different campaigns and projects.
Exactly. And I did put Google Analytics below. It doesn't obviously provide a full-on solution for analytics on social media, but it does provide the source of traffic. And if traffic arrived from any of your social media channels, Google Analytics will be able to tell you received 100 visitors from Instagram or 150 visitors from LinkedIn this week, and that could help you with the kind of measuring and processing the data.
That's a good point, actually. We do web analytics always alongside and in parallel with any social media campaigns. There's lots you can find from Google Analytics as an example in terms of sources of traffic, as Gil says. So that's always there as a source to sort of corroborate what you're seeing on the social media channels, but also to see what direct effect it has on your on traffic to your website. So happy to talk to anyone about how to use Google Analytics better.
And I just wanted to mention that tip I put before, because it's quite important. You're able to spend, some people could spend many hours and perhaps days to create these reports, but manually create these reports. But do think about how much money your time is worth, and maybe it is worth approaching an agency or someone else, or using an analytics tool to help you save that time collecting this data on the campaign.
Yeah. If you're going to spend if you're going to spend a lot of time, spend it on the evaluation, not on assembling the data.
Exactly. Next slide is just to show an example of Sprout Social. This kind of section within the website, within this analytics tools, allows you to see all your posts across different social media platforms, and also understand and compare the impressions, the engagement rates for each one of these, how many comments, how many shares, and all this data you're able to export it. And this raw data will help you with the processing and then analyzing step later. So this is very easy to produce, rather than going to each one of the social media platforms, going to each one of the posts and copy how many shares and likes you have. All right, so processing your data. So the first thing that you need to think about is, you obviously collected this data throughout the campaign. You have the numbers, you have how many shares, how many likes, how many impressions you have. So you got the raw data. You need to decide how you're going to use this and what's the reason of compiling this information, for what purpose this is going to be used. So you need to think about it before you start producing your content. Is this going to be analyzing your, comparing your data to other, benchmarking your business or your campaign to other businesses? If so, you probably need to collect data about your competitors as well, and not just about your own website. So you need to think about compiling your data well before. And again, Ben, did you say
something?
Well,
I was only, you've got used to now by my sharp intake of breath.
Go for it.
I was only going to say we haven't really touched in great detail about paid for media and advertising and sponsorship on social media, predominantly because you wanted to be able to do well organically, primarily first. That would be the sort of pillar of any investment. But what Gil's highlighting here, especially in terms of how the data is processed and how you then best prepare it for other people to analyze it, or that will be able to analyze as a team. So certainly when it comes to obviously paid promotions and larger investments like that, then it's most important, because you really want to be able to determine what kind of return on your investment you're getting, and the data. I'm not saying the data is more important under those circumstances, but you're having to portray the results to a broader set of stakeholders, potentially, maybe even investors themselves. So, that's why the preparation of it and coming up with a standard for that is important.
I'd say even the investment in the organic content creation. So you can, even if you don't decide to sponsor any of your content, like videos or posts, and pay for advertising on these, still there is a cost involved in producing these. So either getting a photographer or a filmmaker, or just doing it yourself, or paying a part-time or a full-time content creator to help you with your data. So it's all worth considering.
Yeah, just the time to do it well is a big investment, isn't it? So.
Absolutely. And that's why we're doing this evaluation, really, to find out what's been working, what hasn't been. Yeah. So next thing is simplifying the outcome, you can create endless amount of reports, and you can process your data in many different ways. You just need to keep it short and effective. You don't want this process to take too much time, and perhaps even not be relevant by the time you finish processing it, as you are already need to start working on your next campaign. So take these few days thinking about how your campaign has gone, but don't take too long. Otherwise, you're kind of going to lose steam and you're not going to have any time to implement your lessons in the next campaigns. Stay objective. This is coming back to Mark's point earlier. It's really easy, especially on social media, to infuse your own personal experience with the fact. If you feel like a campaign has been going well, or let's say here in Marcom, we feel like that this webinar has gone really well. But if we don't look at the facts of the data and how many questions you guys are going to be asking us, or how many messages we've received afterwards, or how many likes we had on our post about these webinars, it's just not going to be as effective when we come to analyze the content.
It goes back as well, doesn't it, to strategically planning for your engagement. Just because you don't like to use a certain channel, you run you sell wellies online, but you hate using Instagram. But 50% of your audience is on Instagram. You have to remain agnostic and objective about where you intend to greet your audience.
Absolutely. Making it presentable. There's many ways to create this data formatted in a really easy way to read. So when you go through and sit in and analyzing the contacting the content in the next step, then you don't need to kind of reprocess as you go again and again. If you have it presentable and it's very easy to read, it's all ready for the next step. And think about who is going to be viewing this information. Doesn't need to be very basic or in high level, or it can go into much more details. I know that I needed basic, but probably Mark would need it much more details for his big brain. So yeah, you need to kind of think, who is this going to go for? And then again, share it with your stakeholders. Think about who needs to see this data, who is this going to be beneficial for, and share it with them in the most presentable way.
Yeah, I think you covered both points there at the end, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
So some examples then, I think, here of, can you talk us through what we're seeing here, Gil?
Yeah, so a couple of examples to show you how you can use a social listening tool, such as this one is an example from Sprout Social. It combines multiple channels into a cross-network performance summary. So in this sort of report, you'll be able to see across all your social media how many impressions your post and content receive, what is the engagement, and what's the ratio between post likes and clicks. Is a great way to kind of present it very quickly and save you time with the processing section. And this is cross-network engagement, just focusing on understanding how much engagement you had in each one of these social media channels. I don't know if you can see, but the different colors represent different social channels. And in this specific report, you can also understand what days of the week were more effective for your content, what content was better across all the channels. And this will help you with the next steps of analyzing your campaign.
I think what's key with these sort of comparative charts of data is, and we'll go into it a bit more, but when you drill down into the analysis of it with the right knowledge, that's really where you start to pick out important parts of findings from these campaigns. The fact that you can do this comparative check across the time period that you are working in and that you're promoting for or publishing for, and being able to see then trends. And certainly when we talk about competitive analysis, being able to track trends across over a period of time for the same activity, it's very useful.
One other quick benefit that these tools have, and we'll be able to talk to you about these as a marketing agency, is that you could compare the results of one campaign to another. You can create specific reports to specific timeframes. So if you had a report last year at the same date, same month or so, you can go back and revert back to the information you had in the past, see what changed, see if you improved, and all the data is kept within the system, so you don't need to go about collecting the information again, or actually there's not always a simple way to backtrack and find out what's been happening in the past. And also some of these tools allow comparing to your competitors, to be able to find out what competitors do and what's their engagement rate, how many followers they have, comparing to what you've been doing in a specific time frame.
Yeah. So important at this point for this next slide to talk about engagement again, and its importance in respect to social media. It's got to form part of your analysis and a sizable chunk of your analysis. It's no surprise that most of the social media channels will take a cross-section of metrics and combine them into formula to determine how your engagement is going. So we'll talk a bit about that again. We have mentioned it before in other webinars, but for those uninitiated, this is important. So why is it important to evaluate engagement? So engagement is very hard won. We all know that. And we know that from experience, because often engagement levels are fairly low on social media, certainly for businesses, and commercial less so for interests and hobbies and community groups and things, but difficult for businesses to ramp up their social media game such that they enjoy great engagement. But
engagement can be at multiple levels as well, can't it? So it's not just commenting, but it's also liking and sharing. And there are other forms of engagement as well, aren't there? Taking part in a survey and so on. And whatever level, it's all engagement rather than just eyes viewing your post.
Yeah. And it's all considered as part of the engagement mix when the social media algorithm is determining your visibility. So there's a technical purpose and there's a commercial purpose in terms of how social platforms measure. There we go at the bottom. Social media engagement, more than just accumulation of followers across social platforms. Measurement of how people are paying attention to and interacting with your brand. So really important to understand that the way, the same way as Google might value sources to your traffic from backlinks, social media is basing its valuation on engagement with your brand and with your content, on how well your brand is perceived and how it's interacted with. So it's an important indicator. Just on that last point. So its importance is why it should be considered at all levels of strategy. It's really the thread that runs through it all. And its importance as an indicator of progress. Engagement rates per se, however they are formulated, incorporate more than one metric. So that tells you something about how engagement rate sort of consolidates the overall activity that you might see on different types of engagement. As Mark said, there are, as well as different forms of content, there are different forms of engaging with that content, but ultimately these are all brought together to determine what we've come to know as an engagement rate.
You can't really overemphasize the importance of engagement either, I don't think. Sorry to interrupt, Ben. No. You can't really overemphasize the importance of engagement, because it depends what metric you're chasing, but it's rare to chase purely number of followers, because it's so easy winning new followers. All you've got to do, let's say you sponsor a football team, all you have to do is give posts about famous players in your football team and things they've said, and you'll get hundreds of followers. But are they engaging with you? Or are they just reading what you're saying, which doesn't really relate to your business? You really need to look behind the sort of raw metrics of numbers of followers and look at what people are actually doing. How much are they paying attention to what you're doing? How much are they being drawn in to what you're saying and how much do they value what you're saying. It's too easy just to say, okay, we'll up our followers by 5,000, 10,000 over the next month. You just put on a load of posts and tweets about interesting, exciting things, and you've got them, but you haven't necessarily got their actual interest and engagement.
Or commitment as a conversion. So there are different engagement rates, which is the point to consider. We talked before about not cooking the figures. This isn't the same thing, but there are engagement rates out there for you and your efforts, depending on the emphasis that you want to put on one modifier or another. Gil's going to talk quickly about a few sort of formula that help to make up engagement rates now.
Yeah, so the most classic engagement rate that everybody is very common practice to talk about is just taking the total number of engagement of a specific post or a specific time frame and divided by the number of followers times by 100. And the total number of engagement commonly is talked about the sum of number of likes, number of impressions, and number of shares, and combining these two divide by the number of followers that you have.
It could be comments as well, right? Like
comments. So likes, comments, and shares. Some people include impressions, and then divided by followers. Now these are quite fluid because you can make up your own sort of engagement rate, but as long as you're persistent with it, you'll be able to find out you'll be able to compare it to previous rates or checks that you've done in the past. So if you check it today and it's 5.6 and then tomorrow is 8.6, then you know that you've made some progress within your engagement. And with time, you'll understand what these little changes mean. The good practice of using these commonly used engagement rates is that you can Google online and see what's your competitors' engagement rate, or finding out or make these calculations for your competitors as well will help you understand and assess how you are doing in terms of engagement. Second one is...
sorry, not so confusing too much there, but so below the dividing line there, total number of followers, that has an emphasis on followers if you were you to track followers as a trend throughout the month. But if, for instance, you change that to the number of posts, that would have a different emphasis on, for instance, how your activity relates to the engagement that you're getting, doesn't it?
Exactly. It's a good way to track it with followers is because when your, I guess, now audience increases, normally your engagement drops. You have many more followers, but less people that are engaging with your brand, but still more than before. So it's good to kind of compare the two with followers, but a lot of people use posts as a dividing factor. The last one is engagement versus impressions. So finding out how many impressions you have per, how many engagements you have per number of impressions. So it's all very useful to kind of understand and comparing throughout your campaigns.
I think the key is to think about what you want to measure, work out the formula for it, which will be one of these. There's anything up to about a dozen or probably 20 formulae like this. Pick your formulae and then stick with it. So you'll see the trends.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you were to use a software or an agency, you don't need to even bother with all this because it's all going to be produced for you automatically.
Yeah. I guess the other thing is every company has a different emphasis on what they want to achieve. So hence our sort of blanket response to this issue. But it's important one because however you weight your formula does really tie into your strategic objectives, and they only may number one or two, but these will relate to that. So they technically are very important engagement rates because they remain a key factor to visibility. That's predominantly on social media, but obviously the more engagement you have on social media, the more activity, the more potentially high-performing backlinks you have to your website. There's this reciprocal benefit there to improving your engagement on social media. So it's and we talked a bit before about converting audiences into customers. We're not just there creating news feeds to talk about ourselves. We're talking about what we think and what we offer, and we're converting our audience to customers, to clients. So visibility is obviously really key to that.
And that's the most important point, really, with engagement. You want to increase you want to increase your engagement rate to get more customers. Because only the engaged people on social media would contact you. They will create some loyalty towards your brand, and then would want to buy your product in the end. So that's why
and it might be a cumulative effect over time. It may be that you need to nurture that engagement. That's another important thing to think about. It's got to be an applied pressure. It's not just something that, it's not just in crude terms the prelude to closing a deal. It's got to be a sort of a nurtured thing, and a nurtured relationship. And then, so really circling back around to the top of this slide, we have to quantify the engagement, and then we have to qualify its value. That's sort of a two-pronged process prior to analysis that enables us to understand a bit better, what does this engagement mean? Because likes are good, but what does a like mean? We can't determine whether someone really likes it or just a little bit likes it, or do you see what I mean? There's shades of in between. So we have to look at it as a whole, understand where the likes have come from, if there's been any other types of engagement that help us to determine what the value of that engagement is. Okay, so I think we're on to...
Yeah, this is really my area, because I guess as a strategist, this is everything we've been talking about so far leads onto this, really, because we've worked out what figures we want to look at. We've worked out how to present them in an interesting way. We've worked out what we're going to measure, how we're going to measure them. And from my perspective, the most important part really is what you then do with these figures, with this knowledge that you've got. And it's really what the nub of this is, to take the figures here, the science that is presented to you, and turn them into something useful for when you get into the next stage of the cycle. So you take what you've understood, learn from it, work out how you're going to adjust your plan to accommodate it, and then implement it. And this is this cycle all over again. So how do you do this? Well, first of all, it's absolutely vital that the KPIs you set at the beginning in your strategic planning, you'll have set up KPIs, I hope. If you've listened to us, you will have. And then you've got your KPIs. Make sure that the data that you have links to your KPIs, and take a good view, a good long hard look at how you're measuring up against your KPIs. The next thing is objectivity is very important, and therefore don't do this on your own. We deal with all sizes of companies. Smaller companies tend to have one person doing this, and that means that the whole strategy is based on one person's analysis. Fine, but two pairs of eyes are better than one, because no two people will look at the same figures and draw the same conclusions from them. So the objectivity that you're looking for, that the stats are giving you, will be more, you will be more true to that level of objectivity if there are two of you doing it rather than just one. Your interpretation is important. The other thing to think of is that it's important to recognize where things are going wrong. It's very easy to think it's all going swimmingly, especially if you've had deep engagement from some individuals or some people on some issues. But if that doesn't measure up as large-scale engagement from lots of people from different segments of your brand plan, then you need to consider whether or not you're doing the right thing and whether it really qualifies as a failure. Perhaps that's a hard word, but qualifies as something that could work better if it was done differently. Hard decisions need to be made here. Hard decisions are not easy to make, but it's better than just drifting along. And then when you are asked to justify what you're up to in the boardroom or wherever, you won't have a leg to stand on. So make those hard decisions and stick to them. Then set new targets and make sure that the targets you're working to are appropriate, because if you are achieving your targets, great, that's very nice. But perhaps does that mean they're set a bit too low or they're not quite right? And if you're not achieving your targets, why not? Are you doing things wrongly, or perhaps there's an aspect of your strategy that isn't quite right and you're attracting the wrong people to your social media? And although you're asking the right questions and you're posting the right information, perhaps if you've attracted the wrong people, you're actually talking to the wrong audience, and you need to rethink the way you do it. So your analysis needs to be done with all of these questions in mind. So moving,
it's informed, isn't it? I just wanted to add to that. Really, we repeat it in every webinar, and of course, underpinning this all is about having a strong strategy, and that's why it helps to have a strategy, so that you can, with confidence, even if you have to adapt it and review it, the analysis helps you to inform that strategy.
Oh yeah. I mean, this will feed directly into your strategy, which you will probably amend ever so slightly before the next round, because you've been fed certain information here which is irrefutable, and you just have to live with it, I'm afraid. But that's business, isn't it? You have to, you fight battles you can win. You don't fight battles you can't win.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this then leads on to, what is your response and what's your future planning going to be, as we've been discussing, and how do you adapt it going forward? And the first point we've made is that, keep doing good things well. And it sounds obvious, but a lot of people say, well, I wasn't very comfortable doing that. Well, if it's producing the figures and the results, then do it anyway, because obviously it's achieving something for you. Perhaps there's room for improvement. There's always room for improvement, but don't drop it just because you're not comfortable with it. If it's working for you, do it. And our second point is the opposite of that. What isn't working? And don't be afraid to do things differently. There's an old saying, test, and test again. And it's so true. It's a continuous round of testing. You never reach that state of nirvana where you can sit back and think, yes, it's exactly how I want it to be, and it's working exactly how I want it to work. Sadly, life is not that simple.
Yeah, I think if you've done the evaluation correctly up until this point, or thoroughly, you'll know what's worked well and what hasn't. Sometimes you might get a result that's fairly indifferent, even to your best efforts. That isn't necessarily a reason to stop trying, and sometimes you just have to knock on the door twice to get the result that you want, or you try something small, try to promote it and publish it in a different way, try and wrap it up under a different message or a different banner, try a different time of the week. Any number of small modifiers that you can do to achieve a much different result. So with that said, then we need to look at these kind of results to see how our targets might change. And Mark talked about strategy and how that might change. Our objectives within that strategy might change. So if we have a campaign plan for the year, or several campaigns planned for the year for marketing alignment, we'll be looking at how those objectives in line with those campaigns might change for the next period based on what we've learned already. Gil, do you want to cover this one?
Yeah, I'd love to do this one. Is content. It's very different on social media, I guess, and maybe in any other outlets. But there's a lot of different factors that influence the success of your content. It could be, as Ben mentioned, the time of the day that you published it. It could be the date. It could be that you published something that was very relevant to a trending topic that was very popular online. Something happened in the world that was very relevant to the post you've sent out, and suddenly you have a spike of engagement on your posts. But sometimes it's the actual content that you've created. And a lot of people, and I read, what we always say is you should go ahead and test different types of content. So you should try to go ahead and use videos, and you try to use live sessions on your social media, create polls, perhaps webinars like these, and see what works and what doesn't. But always keep in mind that maybe your content was successful or unsuccessful due to other reasons, and try to identify those as well doing your analysis.
Yeah, I think we've said before about being objective and being able to take a hard look at certainly when it comes to like quality assurance of your content. What a lot of people do from the outset when they're plotting their sort of social media dominance is to throw everything at it. We want surveys, we want podcasts, we want webinars, we want everything. And like you said, Gil, it's important that you do test and you do try these things. But there's an awful lot of time and effort that goes into creating those things. So you do also want to look for easy wins. As soon as you see a trend emerging for your communications that works for you, that stands out for you, that is a good fit for your audience, is a good fit for your offering, then do more of it.
Yeah, exactly. And another point I wanted to mention here is you need to think whether it was cost effective, whether the time you spent on the content that you've created was worthwhile. So you could have created the best video and got a production company to create a trailer or some intro video for your campaign, but then really no one really engaged with it. And what people really engaged with was a live Q&A that you created. And so it's worth considering that as well, balancing the cost and time that you spent on the post versus its effectivity.
Yeah. And Mark, you're the word guy. You're the wordsmith of our team. What about
Yes. I've spent a lot of time tweaking words and testing words in order to just slightly subtly change the meaning, or to subtly change the appeal to different target groups. And you can do this. You can test things and see what response you get back. And if you've got a headline and it's okay, it's working okay, but it doesn't seem to be getting engagement from people in a certain target group, then why not just tweak that headline, and you might suddenly find that you get more people looking at it. If you're doing an infographic, then why not animate it so that people can see something moving on their screen, which is always attractive, and it tells a little story rather than them having to sit there for 5 minutes and interpret what you're saying. So consider how you can do things differently. Tweak the words, but tweak the actual method that you're communicating with your audience through.
Yeah, I think the way you do things is a message in itself, isn't it? It's what we're saying there. It can be the words, but it's also the way you deliver things is really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also, it's worth considering, what's happening in your strategy. What is it that's right and what is it that's wrong? What do you now understand about it? Have your objectives been met? Does your strategy need to develop? Do you need to do things differently? Or do you need to work harder? Do you need to get more people involved? Do you need to be on different channels? Lots of questions are raised by this round of activity through the evaluation of your previous period's activity. So you need to think about what you're doing and decide whether or not you're going to change it, how you're going to change it. Are you just going to change bits, or are you going to change the whole thing? Very unlikely that you'll be doing the same in stage 2 that you were doing in stage 1. But it may not be a huge difference. It may just be a question of nuance.
And if you've evaluated correctly, you will be more knowledgeable one way or another. So that's important, isn't it? I think that is a really salient point, this last one, and one we repeat. But this is really the point at which we're going back now around the cycle. This is the closing element, I would say, to the evaluation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thank you very much for that. And as I said at the beginning, we're giving something away today because, as I said, believe it or not, we have actually been in business for 30 years this week. And to celebrate, we're sharing what we do with people for free as much as we possibly can. So we'll give a free 60-minute marketing session to the first 15 people to put their names down, and so that you can hopefully both enjoy talking to us and benefit from talking to us, and we can share and coach you perhaps more in what you're up to along the lines of we've been discussing today. There's no commitment. We're just happy to do it. We're all sitting in lockdown, and so we would be out drinking champagne, but instead we'll have a free session with you, which will probably be much more fun anyway. If you click on the chat icon at the bottom of your screen, just put your name and email address there, then we'll get in touch with you. But thank you very much. We now have Q&As as well. So I've been watching lots of questions coming in actually during the course of this webinar. I don't know quite what that says. Does it mean we're saying the right things or the wrong things? I'm not sure. But Gil, can you perhaps start at the top of the list and work down as far as you can?
Yeah, of course. Just wanted to make it clear with the giveaway. If anyone wants to get this one-on-one session with us, you need to send a message now on the chat. Don't wait for after the webinar is closed, as this is the time to let us know that you're interested in this meeting. Let me just open the Q&As, and if anyone's got other questions now, feel free to click on the Q&A section on Zoom and type in any questions that you may have. One of the questions we have is, what should we do, or what should we change if our engagement is very low? I guess I can answer that.
Yeah.
I keep
saying
saying
much you can do, isn't there? Really, I don't know where to start.
Well, yeah, I guess to stop and evaluate and do what we've done today, check why and kind of understand why your engagement has been low, and then trying to think about creative way to change it. Use all the different options and tools that social media has now, especially the most visual tools that you can use to engage with your customers as much as possible. So, for example, a webinar like this, or a live Q&A, or a Facebook Live, or a LinkedIn workshop, or any social events that you could do. And also think about everything you do. You need to think about providing the benefits for your customers. A lot of people just put posts off, and a lot of businesses put posts on social media saying, buy our products, or here are our new services, and this is the new product that we have, and this is what we're doing now. But people don't find that so interesting. What people want is what benefits these products will have for your customers. And another thing is you can ask them questions about it and engage with them that way.
I think a lot of it is down to matching your audience with your messages. So I can think of several occasions at least where we've taken over a company's social media, and they might have quite a large following, but largely it's caused by some charitable involvement they've been doing. So they might be supporting a local charity or a national charity and posting about it on social media. So lots of people who are interested in that charity are then following them. So they've got lots of followers, and that's great. But actually, these people might never, ever be customers of theirs. First of all, it means it's a waste of time on a commercial level talking to them. And secondly, it means that the posts that this company or that we're putting out on behalf of these companies in future will be irrelevant to them. They're not interested in this company's product. They're interested. The reason why they're following them is because they're following this particular charity. So you have to align your audience with what you want to get out of them. And that's a very common thing, really, that you've built up an audience of people who are interested in something not relevant to your strategy now.
Yeah, I could concur with all of that. I think it goes back to what we said about earlier about qualifying the engagement, but also, as Mark said, building or identifying your audience early on. There can be all sorts of reasons why you have low engagement. It's common, frankly, for businesses to have fairly low engagement. It's not uncommon at all. But what is important is that with putting some of the methods that we've talked about in place, you can start to change up a little bit more the style of communications that you have, and you'll look at your tone of communications and go from being very matter of fact, as Gil was saying, this happened here to us and this is what we did, and very kind of Dear Diary like, or here's our product, here's our service, to being much more creative with the way that you nurture that engagement within your audience.
Yeah, and you can also set up a meeting with us and we'll tell you what to do better.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We have another question. Marketing is a soft skill which attracts the kind of people who like to work by intuition as much as data. How would you help someone who struggles with this level of detail?
Gosh, well, I can answer this, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting question. It's absolutely true. As a sort of active fellow of the Chartered Institute of Marketing, I can tell you it is a soft skill, or rather it's often criticised as being a soft skill. I think it has probably changed in the last 10 or 15 years, but the criticism is still there. I think you have to, as a marketer, you have to work with one eye on the figures the whole time. And you have to be conversant with the data and the figures that are being presented to you, because if not, how are you going to justify your activities in the boardroom? And how are you going to see the bottom line affected by what you're doing and what you're doing differently? If you're not comfortable with the figures, then marketing is not the right profession for you. However, if you find yourself in it, come and talk to us, because we'll sort the figures out for you.
Well, so you can't hide from like you said, you've got to be on top of the detail, haven't you? You can't hide from the data. But frankly, it's an era now. I would say there's still lots of room to be creative and intuitive when it comes to marketing, and using that data to see the emerging trends. Sometimes, when you get really good, you can forecast certain changes for certain companies and then in the markets that they're in. So that's really important. But I would say anyone who struggles with the level of detail, unfortunately, we're in an era now which is the age of data. So you've got to get busy with the detail. Unfortunately, you can't hide from the data for long.
Yeah, to contemporize it, are you Boris Johnson or Dominic Cummings? And you need to be more of the Dominic Cummings than the Boris Johnson, but probably in the good old days of Saatchi & Saatchi, you get away with being Boris Johnson and drinking champagne all day.
All right. On that note,
I can't believe it took this long for politics.
Don't mean to be political about it at all.
What tools have competitive analysis of social channels? So what tools have competitive analysis? So I guess finding out on social media what your competitors do.
Mm.
And I can answer that again.
Yeah. Mm.
Well, I guess almost every social media management tool or social media analytics tool have some sort of a competitive analysis. What's worth mentioning there is when you sign up to any of these tools, you give explicit permission to the site to use or to collect data on your behalf. So you need to connect them and integrate them to add your usernames and passwords for Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. for this tool to collect the information. However, if you were to collect data about your competitors, it's a little bit more hard to do because you don't have their access. You don't have free access to their data. So these tools are a little bit more pricey, but they do allow you to enter and type in who is your competitor. And then this software or tool will go in and track every day and find out how many followers they have, how many likes they have on their post, and give you that information and compare your performance versus to your competitors. And some of these tools are like Hootsuite's Analytics, Sprout Social, and then there's many other tools like that. Not all do the best kind of job.
So it's saying that it's the data, isn't it, that's publicly available to those tools to use. LinkedIn has quite a nice one where they wrap up the sort of key metrics for competitors in your field. It might not give you a cross section of all of the competitors that you want to see. Obviously, it depends on which competitors are more or less active on those platforms, but it certainly gives you a good example of things like followers, in some cases engagement rate, though that does vary somewhat between channels. But it enables you, it's really important to have, if you can find the right tools to employ it, obviously to be able to map the trends then against, obviously most importantly, you want to see the changes in your own activity, but if you can map that against trends against your competitors is really useful.
And it's always worth following your competitors as well, because see what they're doing. And assuming that they are going through the sort of process that we've been talking about, then they'll be doing a good job, and there's no harm in stealing ideas from them. And if they're doing a survey on something or other, do a survey yourself, and because presumably they're doing it because it works. So, plagiarize to your heart's content.
And then if the engagement rate's going high, go ahead and check why.
Yeah.
And if their posts have been performing well, so it's worth kind of tracking what your competitors do. And I think we mentioned this throughout the series as well. Check what other companies similar to you in other industries do. Don't just stay in your industry. This will allow you to renovate and bring new things to your industry.
It's a topic I think we could draw a whole webinar on in itself, competitive analysis. And so we've only touched on it here and there, but Gil makes a really important point there about if you see other people doing things well, follow suit.
Do it better, yeah.
Do it better, but yeah.
Do we have more time or?
Well, one more question, I think.
One more question, okay.
We've given rather lengthy answers, so we probably hardly scratched the surface, I think.
Okay, one more question here is, what happens if your analysis throws up an ambiguous result?
Yes, many years of studying data, one of the issues is you sometimes you're none the wiser at the end of it than you were at the beginning, actually, because it can be interpreted in several different ways. And you do have to make a call. And I think, I can't remember how many slides ago, I talked about getting another pair of eyes onto your data. Don't do it on your own, because another person in your organization, in your department, will be able to shed some different light on it. And that might take you into a place where you can understand that actually, although it looks like it's an ambiguous answer, actually it's taking you in one route or another route, something that perhaps it was difficult to put your finger on your own.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think it really lends itself to the notion the importance of the evaluation, to have the evaluations to be able to determine why certain results come out in ways that we don't fully understand on the face of it. Just because you don't necessarily get the result that you want is not, there could be any number of reasons for that. We see with the current situation with coronavirus how companies have changed their modus operandi when it comes to social media, and likewise their audiences have changed the way they use it. So it could be any number of different factors. Could be changes in the market. It could be some big event that's going on for that day. It could be any number of different reasons that means that the result you get is obscured or weighted differently. And maybe the results unexpectedly positive, and you think, well, how did that go viral when it was just a normal run-of-the-mill style post? So evaluating is the key to uncovering those questions, really.
Maybe just one more thing that kind of popped into my mind. Don't give up with social media, because it can be frustrating at times, and people would send a few posts trying a variety of different content, and then just say, oh, it's not working, I can't be bothered anymore, and not do it and stop doing it. So yeah, keep with it. The more time you spend on it, and the more time you spend evaluating what you've done and improving on, will help you reach your results eventually on social media.
Yeah, I agree. I think it ties in a way with the sort of reminder at the bottom there. We have to define the things before investing too much, but we need to try. We need to endeavour. And Rome wasn't built in a day. And social media is very much like that. You have to build. It's why we put so much emphasis on recycling your efforts, is to be able to sort of develop a momentum, but stick at it, and you'll see the gains.
Okay, I think we've probably done enough now. Thank you very much to my colleagues, and thank you for listening. It's nice to see so many of you still there, and hope you've been enjoying it. We'd like to hear from you. We want to carry on with this program of webinars, which have been so successful, and so many people have been learning a lot from, according to our feedback. So we're delighted about that. Let us know what you would like to learn about, and we'll put it in the mix, and hopefully do a webinar on it one day soon. And put your ideas in the chat box at the bottom, and also or drop me an email. You'll find details on the website. In fact, I think they're coming up in a couple of slides. And then we will consider doing a webinar on what are clearly popular topics, but we need to be told by you what you'd like to hear, please. And don't forget that we're giving away a couple of free sessions. Well, a couple. First 15 who put the names down. I don't know if we're up to 15 yet, because I haven't had a chance to look.
Nearly gone, yeah.
Right, okay, so be quick if you want one. We're Marcom, 30 years old this week, and can't quite remember which day of the week it was. I presume it was Monday.
That would be impressive.
I think it was the Monday.
Probably Monday morning.
We position ourselves as your marketing department, so we're here to provide support for all your marketing communications, and you can see on the screen now the strategic elements in the red ring around the more tactical elements inside, which roughly speaking are online and offline. 95% of our work is online, and 95% of that is in terms of different aspects of digital marketing. So please do consider how we might be able to help you. And if you'd like to meet up, then call me. That's my number on the screen now. And I'll respond to your email at info@marcom.net. Thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. We'll be in touch when that comes up. But don't forget to give us your recommendations or your ideas for more webinars, what you'd really like to learn about from us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.